You wait to the sound of engines that do not pass. They idle on purpose. They wait as if time itself has been ordered to stop. Boots strike the road in measured steps, not hurried, not confused, moving outward in a practiced pattern that seals every exit before you understand what is happening. Your phone vibrates once, twice, then the signal collapses. Internet dies mid-screen. Messages freeze, half loaded, half erased. Calls fail. Outside your gate, uniforms replace neighbors, metal barriers replace open streets, rifles hang low but ready, fingers relaxed but trained. Cameras point inward, not at the road, not at traffic, but at your door. This is not crowd control. This is containment. Somewhere else in the city, a sentence appears online and spreads faster than orders can stop it. I am not free. No speech. No rally. No explanation. Just 4 words, sharp enough to cut through denial, heavy enough to bend a country. Screenshots multiply. Copies travel faster than truth ever does. Imagine this is Nigeria. Not tomorrow. Not Sunday. This morning. A candidate writes the line and within minutes his house is sealed, his street erased from the map, food deliveries turned away, lawyers told to wait, friends warned not to come, allies unreachable by nightfall. One disappears. Then another. Then another. Silence spreads faster than truth, because fear always travels light. Your first instinct is rejection. Nigeria cannot be this. Our courts exist. Our institutions are strong. Our faith protects us. God would not allow it. But there are moments when heaven is quiet and power fills the space with noise. When God is silent, authority shouts. The most dangerous crackdowns do not arrive with explosions or gunfire. They arrive clean, organized, justified. They wear the language of law. They look legal enough to confuse people just long enough for fear to settle in a habit. You do not hear tanks. You hear procedure. You do not see chaos. You see order weaponized, paperwork moving faster than conscience. This is how freedom collapses without warning. Not all at once, but while citizens argue whether anything is really happening. While commentators debate definitions. While neighbors tell each other to stay calm. By the time agreement is reached, the doors are already locked. Ask yourself before you look away, before you scroll past, before you say this cannot happen here. If you woke up to this scene, if this sound was outside your gate, if this silence filled your phone, would you still call it stability? Or would you finally admit that something irreversible had been done, right outside your door? This is not speculation. This already happened, in real time, in front of cameras, and nothing stopped it. After the election in Uganda, after ballots were counted and victory was announced, the country did not settle into calm. It snapped. One short message from Bobi Wine cracked the surface and exposed what had been sealed underneath. I am not free. No slogans followed. No call to the streets. No dramatic appeal. Just a blunt statement of fact, written as if time itself were running out. Within hours, streets filled without coordination, police lines hardened without warning, and tear gas replaced campaign zones. The shift was violent in its speed. Civic ritual collapsed into confrontation. Celebration turned into control. Authority did not hesitate. It moved first. Patrols multiplied across neighborhoods. Checkpoints appeared where traffic lights once stood. Restrictions expanded faster than explanations. And the language changed instantly. Security. Order. Prevention. Stability. Words selected carefully, scrubbed clean, designed to sound responsible and unavoidable. Many accepted them, not because they were convinced, but because acceptance feels safer than resistance when fear is fresh. But the slide had already begun. What followed was not confusion or panic. It was structure. It was design. The state did not lose control. It exercised it. When power feels threatened, it closes ranks. When it closes ranks, dissent does not explode. It suffocates. Uganda did not fall in one dramatic night. It slept in a matter of hours. Fear became policy. Silence became currency. Compliance became survival. The message did not need to be announced because it was demonstrated. This is what happens when you refuse to submit. Watch carefully. Learn the cost. Adjust accordingly. From that moment forward, obedience would be rewarded, and courage would be isolated, then punished. The world watched, as it always does. Statements were issued. Concerns were noted. Headlines moved on. And that is the most dangerous part. Because when a pattern is allowed to complete itself once, it becomes reusable. It becomes portable. It waits for the next place, the next election, the next moment of tension. Uganda was not an exception. It was a test case. And the silence that followed did not mean the danger had passed. It meant the lesson had been learned by those who were paying attention, and stored carefully for use somewhere else. Then the names began to vanish, one by one, without announcement, without explanation, without urgency from those in power. 3 names. 3 silences that said more than any speech. 1 deputy taken directly from his home, doors forced open in the early hours when witnesses are few and fear works best. 1 removed from public view and never returned, his last trace reduced to rumors and unanswered calls. 1 held inside a police station without a public charge, without a court appearance, without a date that meant anything. No warrants shown. No timelines given. Only the same phrase repeated calmly, procedures are being followed. This was not random enforcement. It was not overreach. It was method. Opposition was not outlawed, because banning creates resistance. It was dismantled instead, piece by piece, quietly enough to avoid headlines but decisively enough to break structure. When leadership disappears, movements do not explode. They collapse inward. Coordination dies. Trust erodes. Fear replaces strategy. Elections remain on paper while power consolidates in practice. This is how democracy is neutralized without declaring its death, without suspending constitutions, without tanks in the streets. The public is told nothing unusual is happening. Officials speak in measured tones. Days pass. News cycles move on. Attention shifts to other crises. Silence settles into routine. Soon, absence feels normal. People stop asking where the missing are. They begin asking who might be next. That is the transition point. Ask yourself honestly, without comfort or denial, if 3 senior opposition figures disappeared in Nigeria tomorrow, how many days would it take before outrage softened into fatigue? How long before people adjusted their language, their movements, their expectations? Power understands exhaustion better than it understands justice. It knows anger burns fast but fades. So it delays. It distracts. It drains. It waits for outrage to tire itself out. By the time citizens realize something irreversible has occurred, the alternatives are already gone. This is not about individuals or personalities. It is about removing choice. And when choice disappears, voting does not disappear with it. It becomes performance. A ritual staged for an audience that no longer decides the ending, only pretends to. Officials spoke calmly, choosing the cleanest words they could find. They said protection was being provided. They said safety was the priority. They said the measures were temporary and necessary. The language sounded reasonable, almost comforting. It always does. But protection does not block food at the gate. Safety does not cut communication until families cannot reach one another. Temporary measures do not stretch into open-ended confinement without explanation. What was described as care functioned as control. What was named security operated as detention. The gap between words and reality widened quietly, just enough for denial to breathe. When a state can lock a family inside its own home and call it protection, the law has already chosen a side. At that point legality becomes flexible, adjustable, responsive to power rather than principle. Truth becomes optional, something to be managed instead of respected. Citizens are then asked to trust the narrative over their own eyes. Many comply because trusting authority feels safer than confronting it, especially when the cost of doubt is high. But every time language disguises force, a line is crossed. Once crossed, it becomes easier to cross again. Today it is one house. Tomorrow it is a block. Next week it is a neighborhood, then a city, then a habit no one questions anymore. This is not paranoia. It is pattern. History records it clearly. Nigeria already knows these words. Stability. Order. National security. They have been used to disperse protests, justify arrests, and silence uncomfortable questions. Each time, the justification sounds responsible. Each time, the damage compounds quietly. When security becomes the answer to every demand, truth is the first casualty, followed closely by accountability. Then the story narrows, sharply, into one human voice. Bobby Wine says it without metaphor, I escaped from my own house. A politician speaks like a fugitive. He describes threats delivered openly, ultimatums announced publicly, deadlines imposed as if guilt were already decided. Opposition, he says, is treated as terrorism. This is the moment the mask slips. No democracy requires its opponents to surrender like criminals. No republic hunts ideas with uniforms and curfews. When power stays too low, institutions stop acting as referees. They become extensions of one will. Neutrality disappears. Loyalty becomes survival. Politics turns into a chase, and fear becomes a tool of governance. The question then shifts toward Nigeria's streets and homes, uncomfortably close. If this happened here, where would you go? Who would protect you when protection becomes the threat? Scripture offers an old lesson. David fled from Saul not because he was weak, but because power had lost restraint and could no longer hear truth. Persecution often wears the face of authority. Faith does not mean denial. It means discernment. Silence is not holiness when injustice is loud. Prayer without awareness becomes surrender. If a leader must flee his own house to stay alive, what refuge remains for ordinary citizens whose names will never trend, whose disappearances will never make headlines? Nigeria has not fallen. But it is standing on the same slope. Protests have been dispersed in the name of order. Activists detained in the name of security. Information restricted during moments of tension. Laws stretched until meaning blurs and exceptions feel normal. Institutions are tested quietly, not with open confrontation, but with pressure, delay, and ambiguity. Bodies like the NJC become symbols of justice under strain, asked to bend without breaking, to wait without denying, to survive without deciding. History does not repeat with identical scenes. It repeats with familiar decisions. Each one appears small. Each one sounds justified. Together they form a path that becomes difficult to reverse without pain. The slope feels safe until footing is lost. Ask yourself honestly where Nigeria stands today. How many exceptions have already been normalized? How often has stability been used to silence discomfort? When courts hesitate and commissions delay, the message spreads without being spoken. Power is consolidating. Obedience becomes safer than dissent. Adjustment replaces resistance. Yet every society has a red line. The real danger is not crossing it. The danger is not knowing where it is until it has already disappeared behind you. This is not about one man, one face, or one election cycle. Names change. Faces rotate. Parties rebrand. The method remains intact. Constitutions are adjusted quietly, then amended openly. Term limits are erased in the name of continuity. Age limits are removed in the name of experience. None of it is done to improve governance. It is done to extend control. When leaders begin to see time in office as entitlement, leaving power feels like theft. Departure becomes humiliation. Opposition turns into treason. Repression is reframed as responsibility. Uganda is not unique. It is an example. Nigeria is not condemned. It is a possibility. Others have walked this road before, convinced they were different, convinced their institutions would stop the slide. The pattern never announces itself as tyranny. It presents itself as necessity. First comes the argument that stability matters more than rules. Then the claim that rules must bend for the greater good. Then the insistence that those who disagree are dangerous, reckless, or unpatriotic. By the time force is visible, justification has already been rehearsed. Power that refuses to leave eventually refuses to listen. And when listening ends, force begins to speak. It does not always shout at first. Sometimes it whispers through regulations, delays, and selective enforcement. Sometimes it smiles while it signs documents. This is not destiny. It is choice, repeated often enough to feel inevitable. Every step can be defended in isolation. Together they form a system that cannot tolerate challenge. Awareness is the first interruption. Attention is the first resistance. The moment people stop watching, the mold hardens. The moment questions fade, control deepens. Understanding the pattern matters because patterns can be broken before they become permanent. Silence is not neutral. Distraction is not harmless. Looking away is participation by default. So stay present. Stay alert. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for continuity. Watch closely, not because fear demands it, but because responsibility does. Ask questions. Compare notes. Remember what you see. Because what comes next does not depend only on leaders or institutions. It depends on whether people are still paying attention when the method tries to repeat itself one more time. In the end, elections do not decide freedom. Keys do. Paper ballots cannot protect a people if doors can be sealed by a single order. Constitutions cannot breathe if deputies can vanish overnight without explanation. Democracy cannot function if internet access can be cut at will, silencing millions with the flip of a switch. When these powers exist, voting alone becomes ceremony, not shield. The final question is not procedural. It is moral. Who holds the key to the state, and who is locked outside when decisions are made? God sees injustice even when courts delay and commissions hesitate. Faith does not excuse indifference. It demands responsibility. Moses did not wait for Pharaoh to soften. He confronted power directly. Esther did not remain silent when silence felt safer. She spoke because delay meant death. History remembers those who recognized the moment before doors closed completely, not those who explained later why they stayed quiet. Prayer without courage becomes habit. Belief without action becomes comfort. Neither stops a lock from turning. This message is not only for Uganda. It is for Nigeria. It is for any society watching institutions weaken quietly, one exception at a time. It is for citizens who sense that something is shifting but are told to relax, to trust, to wait. Waiting has never stopped consolidation. Silence has never protected freedom. Attention has. If you believe this path must be stopped before it hardens, say it out loud. Share this message so it cannot be buried. Write your refusal where others can see it. If you think this warning is real, type enough and mean it, not as a slogan, but as a line you will not cross. Ask yourself what you will do if the next step happens, not after, but now. And if you want to understand which country could be next if this pattern continues unchecked, stay. Watch. Question. Prepare. Because locks do not turn suddenly. They turn slowly, click by click, while people debate whether the door is really closing. It has not locked yet. But the key is already in the door, and someone's hand is resting on it.